Hello, hello, welcome everybody. I'm Jev, yes, Triple V. The accent, by the way, is purely Kiwi. I read old stories for children, so we keep this a family-friendly channel by having bad word blockers, banning bots, and preventing spam. So that means new followers need to wait a few minutes before they can join in the chat. Since these stories are so old, they're now in the public domain, which means they are free to read for anyone and by anyone, the way many Christmas songs are. The digital versions I read are from Project Gutenberg, and you'll find the link for that below. The physical ones are just old books my family has lying around. Sometimes I'll even show them to you. These, by the way, are live reads. Think of them as bedtime stories rather than actual audiobooks. You get the benefits of my mistakes, distractions, explanations, and terrible attempts at accents, along with plenty of chat and interruptions as we find out about things in the story. If you need to do work or chores, then that's fine. Just come and lurk. Please adjust your volume to suit. There are captions available if you have to be quiet or you have hearing challenges, but be warned, sometimes the captions aren't always that accurate. I am a member of the Codex, an awesome group of reading streamers on Twitch. People from many walks of life who share their love of reading, and you'll find links to the Codex reading team and our Discord server below. A special feature of the Codex Discord is the security channel for those of you who stream or moderate. You'll find lots of practical, useful information to help keep your stream and your community safe. So, hang around and come discover adventure with me. You never know what we'll find. Hello, everybody, and how are you? I hope you're well, and welcome back. Yes, I've got my Christmas calendar up. The one I got from my Secret Santa, the New Zealand-wide Secret Santa that was being run by a Blue Sky. Um, Yay, lovely to have it there. That's actually an island up in the Bay of Islands. Is it? Is it the one I'm thinking of? Hang on. Yes, Roberton Island or Motu Arohia Island. That's part of it, which you can't see because. Let's just turn the green screen off. Hang on a minute. Camera, filters. Pause filter for a minute. There you go. Now it looks more normal. So it's this lovely sweeping green hills. Yes, our hills tend to be a little bit bigger. It has been farmed, it is still farmed to a certain extent, and it's also a popular destination for people in small boats. So that's in the Bay of Islands, which is in the northern part of the North Island, for those who are wondering. Let's turn chroma key back on. So we have our lovely backdrop of woodlands. Looks cooler with green screen on. Yes, it does. Like it's this massive great lagoon here, which has got light shining through it with those, what do you call them? Corpuscular rays? Isn't that what they're called? You know, the fingers of God. Stuff, these light rays here, which is partly why I chose this particular image, because I thought it looked a little bit more fairy tale. I was going to find something that was more appropriate, but we had a family friend visit. And it was really, really good catching up with them. And so that took up the 2 hours ahead of time where I would be doing my random stuff to do with streaming ahead of time when I'm changing books. So we are back to the Blue Fairy Tale book by Andrew Lang. This one was first published in 1889, and it is the first of many, many books that he and his wife produced. And I'm not going to be reading all of them. And what we discovered when I was reading it last time is just how long this book is. There's a lot of stories in it. And it was designed as something which was going to be a series of books that would be expanded and expanded. And what he did was he took existing fairy tales that were already known but were in archaic language or in French or German or something like that, and retold them appropriately for children of the era that he was actually publishing for. His wife did editing. The earlier books, he did a lot of the base fairy tale telling, and she then did a second pass on it to make it flow better, I think. And then later ones, she actually did them all completely. But because it was okay for a woman to be a publisher, but not a book compiler author, I don't know. He was the one whose name was on the books. In theory, it should be both of their names on the books. And I can't even remember what her name is at the moment. Excuse me, my eyes are itchy. I've got a bit of stuff in the corner of my eye. I can't go on until I've dealt with that, and hope I don't have other bits hanging around the edges of my eye where I can see them. Do you ever have that happen? It's just something that you can see it out of the corner of your eye, and it's like, what is that? Go away, sort of thing. Yeah. Let's see if I can find out what her name is. Leonora Blanche Lang. I don't think they called her Leonora. Might have been Nora. Nora Lang. There you go. So it's Andrew and Nora Lang, but on the published editions, especially the early ones, it's always just by Andrew Lang. So that's a bit sad. But that's just the way it was in publishing back in the day. I was going to find you some other information. So the sources that they used, they collected stories without, some of them they didn't attribute, the other ones they did. The rest have small notes in the original versions. Some of them are helpful notes, some of them aren't. And some of them, they say who it was, told the story that they were translating and editing down for children. So there's a wide range there. Hang on. Adding to my personal dislike of the person of J.R.R. Tolkien, he wrote an essay called On Fairy Stories in 1939. He appreciated the collections of books that the Langs had done or were doing, but objected to the editing of the stories for children. He also criticised Lang for including stories without magical elements in them, such as The Heart of a Monkey. And he actually specifically cites that one, etc. However, many fairy tale collections include tales that don't have strictly marvellous or magical elements in them. So, J.R.R. Tolkien, a fabulous author, brilliant creator, very, very narrow-minded. It was his way or everyone was wrong. And a lot of us are like that. But generally speaking, most of us don't have quite such a large audience to actually have people quoting us when we say that sort of thing. So he objected to the fact that they were called fairy tales but didn't all include magic. Like, he's the arbiter? No, thank you very much. And they were being rephrased so that children could enjoy them. No, you're not allowed to do that. That's what he said. Well, yeah. And no kid is going to read, unless they're precocious, like really advanced in their own way. Most children are not going to enjoy reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I can tell you that now. Some adults had a hard time with it too. In fact, some adults got so annoyed with it that if they hadn't had to pay some of their very little income that they were getting at the time to buy the book in the first place, they would have either shredded it or thrown it across the room repeatedly, because it was just dead boring and the story was not advancing because the writer was just too clever for his own good. So yes, I have some rather strong opinions about certain authors. And they're not all moral opinions. Often they are stylistic opinions. And that's okay. And I love the fact that I have friends. I have a friend whose daughter is named after one of the Tolkien characters because she loved the books and it was just right for the time that she read the books, and she still loves them. She doesn't have that barrier with boring because she doesn't have an ADHD brain for a start. So yeah, there's all that sort of stuff that goes on. And a lot of people don't realize that when you have an opinion about a book, that's your opinion. You're allowed to have your opinion. You're allowed to have the taste that you have. You're allowed to dislike a particular author because they consistently keep doing a certain thing which you don't enjoy. That's fine. I loved The Hobbit. I hated the second book of the trilogy in The Lord of the Rings. I preferred the movie because what they did was they took some of the action from the third book and shoved it into the second as the movie. And that kind of made it a bit more interesting. Otherwise, I would have just been like, yeah, whatever. Also, if you ever do watch the Peter Jackson ones and that sort of fantasy style of movie is not your thing and you got lost the very first time you watched the movies, see if you can watch an extended edition of them. We have a friend who is not into fantasy and went and saw the movies and thought they were a waste of time because she got lost in the story. Not lost in the story so engrossed, but just got lost in the first one. And it just didn't make sense to her. Her family borrowed our extended edition DVD at the time, which I don't think plays anymore just because they do actually degrade. DVDs degrade. Borrowed it at the time when we had it, and they watched it as a family because their kids were old enough by that stage to cope with it. And she thoroughly enjoyed it, and it made sense because the little bits that had been taken out for the theatrical release were little bits of information that her brain needed to know to make the story work. And that's why sometimes it's worth watching the director's cut of something. So there you go. I have all sorts of opinions, and I'm going to give some of them to you. So what we're going to do, we're going to have an ad break, I think. It hasn't run yet, but it's running now. There you go. And then after that, I'll do a tips video. So do I have illustrations for this? I'm going to check. While you guys are all watching your ads, thank you very much for watching the ads. I do appreciate that. It gives me a few cents each time. I'm going to also have a look in my streaming folder for this particular book and see if I have any of the illustrations queued up that I can then put into my overlay here. I'm looking for the folder called Ideas Reading, and then within that the folder called Specific Books, and then within that the one that is called Andrew Lang, because yeah, I'm not just going to go through the alphabet. For all of the books, I'm going to put the author first. If it's an author that's written a lot of books, I'll put their name if I think I'm going to remember it. If it's a series like Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys, I will use that name, the series name. And then within it, I will put the different books. And then if there are any illustrations, I'll pull them up. Illustrations. Ooh, I do have illustrations. Are they in the right order, though? They appear to be. I think I just need to add that into... Yes, I do. Ad break has ended. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to let you guys watch a tips video while I set up the illustrations. That's a good idea, isn't it? So here we go. No, not S. Who have we got today? And welcome back. And thank you, Goriki. Goriki says, I am a glowing box of chocolates. Thank you so much. That's lovely. It is still warm here, hence the sleeveless shirt. I'm sorry about that. I would really rather wear sleeves, but it's just too hot. Also why the hair is looking rather whatever. So now I've got illustrations for the book. Yay. Let's see if they're going to work. I can't even remember how far through. Yeah, okay, I know it's got that there, but we'll just go like this. I can't even remember if I showed any of these to you last time. I think these are the ones for this book. I'm just looking to see if I need to move this over a bit, because there is one that's actually horizontal. I don't need to do that. I can, no, let's just not do that. I can just turn that off and get back to it when I need it. Sorry. Unnecessary. Brain going sideways. Right. We are reading the Blue Fairy book. Words. We are reading the Blue Fairy book by Andrew Lang, first published in 1889, and he is an English author or editor. because he compiled and translated and what's it called when you condense it a little bit and make the language easier to read? There's a special word for it. I used to see it on kids' books all the time because they were reprints of adults' books, but had been. It's just a word I haven't got at the moment. It'll come right in the middle of me reading. I know it will. Right, so we are starting. The first story we're going to start with is The Water Lily. The Water Lily, the Gold Spinners. That's an odd name. So we'll carry on and see what's going to happen. I have no idea. And I don't even know if the book I'm reading for has the illustrations that I got for you. I hope it does, because otherwise I'm just not going to be using any just because I don't know where they're meant to go. Well, we'll carry on. The Water Lily, the Gold Spinners. Once upon a time, in a large forest, abridged, the abridged editions. They have been abridged for younger readers. There you go. I told you I'd remember. Once upon a time, in a large forest, there lived an old woman and 3 maidens. Do you know what a maiden is, children? A maiden in the old days often meant a younger woman who was unmarried. Not necessarily a girl. They didn't used to use the word teenager because that is a much more recent word. It could have been a teenager, but much more likely a young woman who was old enough to be married but wasn't married. But we don't know. We're going to read on and find out. An old woman and 3 maidens. They were all 3 beautiful, but the youngest was the fairest. Their hut was quite hidden by trees, and none saw their beauty but the sun by day and the moon by night, and the eyes of the stars. The old woman kept the girls hard at work from morning till night, spinning gold flax into yarn. And when one distaff was empty, another was given them, so they had no rest. Now, a distaff is the stick that the unspun fibre is stuck onto to hold it up in place for when you are going to be spinning. So the old days, the phrase a distaff and spindle means where you have a stick that you are holding that has all the fibre on it, just a loose cloud of fibre, and then you have some of it comes across to your spindle, which is a stick that comes down with a weight on it, and it has some of this fibre comes across, and you spin that, and then you actually let the thread pull outwards from the stuff that comes across, and the spinning of that spindle actually winds it into thread, and then you roll it up onto that stick, and then you carry on. And then the other use of the word is the distaff side of the family, means the woman's side of the family. So when you have a couple, are they from his side of the family or are they her side of the family? And the distaff side means the women's side of the family, just because women used to do that sort of spinning. Used to do the spinning because it was woman's work. Anyway, so distaff. When one distaff was empty, another was given to them, so they had no rest. The thread had to be fine and even, and when done, was locked up in a secret chamber by the old woman. Oh, sounds like child slavery here, almost, except that they're maidens, not children. And it says that it's golden flax, so I wonder if it's gold, not just standard flax. Flax that forms linen. This is made out of linen. Used to be a very common fabric that people used to wear before cotton was discovered and grown en masse. People didn't originally like cotton when it first came out. They weren't used to the feel of it. They liked wool and linen. So let's carry on. The thread had to be fine and even, and when done was locked up in a secret chamber by the old woman, who twice or thrice every summer went on a journey. Before she went, she gave out work for each day of her absence, and always returned in the night, so that the girls never saw what she brought back with her, neither would she tell them whence the gold flax came, nor what it was to be used for. Now, when the time came round for the old woman to set out on one of these journeys,
She gave each maiden work for 6 days with the usual warning: children, don't let your eyes wander, and on no account speak to a man, for if you do, your thread will lose its brightness, and misfortunes of all kinds will follow. They laughed at this oft-repeated caution, saying to each other, how can our gold thread lose its brightness? And have we any chance of speaking to a man? What is this man of which you speak? So she's saying children, but she's also saying don't speak to any men, which implies that they are effectively of marriageable age, because they'll be distracted by a man. Oh no, terrible, can't have that. On the 3rd day after the old woman's departure, a young prince hunting in the forest got separated from his companions and completely lost. Weary of seeking his way, he flung himself down under a tree, leaving his horse to browse at will, and fell asleep. The sun had set when he awoke and began once more to try and find his way out of the forest. At last he perceived a narrow footpath, which he eagerly followed, and found that it led him to a small hut. The maidens, who were sitting at the door of their hut for coolness, saw him approaching, and the 2 elder were much alarmed, for they remembered the old woman's warning. But the youngest said, never before have I seen anyone like him. Let me have one look. She's bold. They entreated her to come in, but seeing that she would not, they left her, and the prince, coming up, courteously greeted the maiden, and told her that he had lost his way in the forest and was both hungry and weary. She set food before him and was so delighted with his conversation that she forgot the old woman's caution. She's never met anyone apart from her sisters, if they are sisters, and the old woman. So, having conversation with somebody else, yeah, nice thing to do. She forgot the old woman's caution and lingered for hours. In the meantime, the prince's companions sought him far and wide, but to no purpose. So they sent 2 messengers to tell the sad news to the king, who immediately ordered a regiment of cavalry and one of infantry to go and look for him. Cavalry, horse riding. Infantry, foot soldiers. Lots of men. No! After 3 days' search, they found the hut. 3 days and 3 days. So the old woman's going to come back any minute now, because she gave them tasks for 6 days. So she's expecting to be back any minute. Oh dear. And we're going to find out she's a witch and she's going to enchant somebody or something. Or the prince is going to break the spell. We'll find out. After 3 days' search, they found the hut. The prince was still sitting by the door and had been so happy in the maiden's company that the time had seemed like a single hour. Before leaving, he promised to return and fetch her to his father's court, where he would make her his bride. When he had gone, she sat down to her wheel to make up for lost time, but was dismayed to find that her thread had lost all its brightness. Isn't that what the old lady said? Her heart beat fast, and she wept bitterly, for she remembered the old woman's warning, and she knew not what misfortune might now befall her. So she's scared of the old lady, isn't she? The old woman returned in the night and knew by the tarnished thread what had happened in her absence. Dun, dun, dun. Water, people. We are all drinking water. She was furiously angry and told the maiden that she had brought down misery both on herself and on the prince. She knew, or as the maiden told her. The maiden could not rest for thinking of this. At last she could bear it no longer, and resolved to seek help from the prince. As a child, she had learned to understand the speech of birds, and this was now of great use to her, for seeing a raven pluming himself on a pine bough, she cried softly to it, "Dear bird, cleverest of all birds, as well as swiftest on wing, wilt thou help me?" "How can I help thee?" asked the raven. She answered, "Fly away until thou comest to a splendid town where stands a king's palace. Seek out the king's son, and tell him that a great misfortune has befallen me." Then she told the raven how her thread had lost its brightness. I wonder if this is an implication that there was other things going on, not just chit-chat. We never know with these stories. Sometimes there's these subtle implications. for the knowing elders who were reading them. How her thread had lost its brightness, how terribly angry the old woman was, and how she feared some great disaster. The raven promised faithfully to do her bidding, as long as he's not the old lady's familiar, because he'll tell her instead. And spreading its wings, flew away. The maiden now went home and worked hard all day at winding up the yarn her elder sisters had spun, for the old woman would let her spin no longer. Toward evening she heard the ravens cry, cry from the pine tree, and eagerly hastened thither to hear the answer. By great good fortune, the raven had found a wind wizard's son in the palace garden. Wind wizard. Okay. In the palace garden, who understood the speech of birds, and to him he had entrusted the message. Because the girl didn't even think about the fact that people don't normally talk to birds and understand each other. When the prince heard it, he was very sorrowful, and took counsel with his friends how to free the maiden. Then he said to the wind wizard's son, "Beg the raven to fly quickly back to the maiden, and tell her to be ready on the 9th night, for then I will come and fetch her away." The wind wizard's son did this, and the raven flew so swiftly that it reached the hut that same evening. Does this put the day count out? So is he going to end up coming on the 10th night instead of the 9th night? I don't know. Let's read on. Sorry, these are the sort of things that have always gone through my mind, even as a child when I was listening to books or reading books myself, where you have this setup for a possible problem coming up, or a possible unexpected twist in a story. I've always seen these sort of things. It's a combination of the pattern recognition that the autistic part of my brain tends to do, and the fast processing that the ADHD part of my brain does. And so I end up with like being able to, when I had schoolmates I'll stop that. When I was at school, last year of school, or the second to last year of school, there was some really, really popular TV series came on. And it was a limited series. It wasn't one that was going to go on and on for year after year after year. And it had all these relationships in it and stuff. I didn't watch it. It wasn't really my sort of thing. But my friends were talking about it. And so one day I just stood up, and it was about a quarter of the way into the series. So I stood up on one of the benches that everyone was sitting on, and I said, "So and so is going to marry such and such other character is going to be all upset about this, and the guy is who's going to marry this girl, he's going to be delighted, and then she's going to go mad, and they're going to put her in an institution." And I was just reeling off all this stuff, and I thought I was being funny, and the others were sort of like, no, don't say that sort of thing, because they didn't want the sort of stuff I was talking about to happen. They kept on talking about the series as they kept on watching it through the different, lunch breaks and things like this over the course of when this was playing out on TV. They got to the end of it, and somebody looked at me and said, "How did you know all that was going to happen?" I could tell within the first quarter that they had seen that these were the likely outcomes because of the way that sort of storytelling is done. There are certain conventions, certain tropes. That's all it was. Even though I hadn't actually read or watched a lot of that sort of thing myself, I'd heard enough of them to know. It's just all it is. So, but that's also why when we're reading something and I give you a sudden side branch of a possibility of what might or might not happen, it's because my brain is doing that, and it just sort of comes out because I can't not. I'm sorry. Let's carry on with the story. So he arrived that same evening. So I'm wondering, because they're talking about a specific number of days, and so my brain goes, is this going to disrupt things or not? Because they're making a point of both. He arrived that same evening, and this is how many days I'm going to be before I arrive. So, I don't know. The maiden thanked the bird heartily and went home, telling no one what she'd heard. As the 9th night drew near, she became very unhappy, for she feared lest some terrible mischance should arise and ruin it all. On this night she crept quietly out of the house and waited trembling at some little distance from the hut. Presently, yay, they did get it right. Presently she heard the muffled tramp of horses, and soon the armed troop appeared, led by the prince, who had prudently marked all the trees beforehand in order to know the way. Marked the trees beforehand. Was this when they came and rescued him and took him home, or was this he'd been in those 9 days? This is strange. There are facts that they give us for no apparent reason. Are they red herrings or are they relevant? I don't know. I mean, yes, it's relevant that he marked the way. That's how he found his way. But to say he had marked it beforehand implies that there was a specific instance. Was it when he was lost and being taken home? Was it in the middle of that 9 days? What was he doing for that 9 days? You know, all of this sort of stuff. Because it only takes 3 days to get home, maximum. Because that was how long for the soldiers to go and report him missing and all this other sort of stuff carrying on. So, yeah. In my mind, poor storytelling, because it's distracting the reader, the listener, from where the essence of the story is going. But we will go with it. Don't forget, this is Andrew Lang's first of these books. Hopefully he got better at it. No, I'm not good at telling stories better than him, but I can actually assess some things like this. So the prince had prudently marked all the trees beforehand in order to know the way. When he saw the maiden, he sprang from his horse, lifted her into the saddle, and then mounting behind, rode homeward. The moon shone so brightly that they had no difficulty in seeing the marked trees. By and by, the coming of dawn loosened the tongues of all the birds. So, dawn chorus. And had the prince only known what they were saying, or the maiden been listening, they might have been spared much sorrow. Oh, the girl has the ability to understand birds. They're hearing all these birds, and she's got her fingers in her ears or something. But they were thinking only of each other, and when they came out of the forest, the sun was high in the heavens. Next morning, when the youngest girl did not come to her work, the old woman asked where she was. The sisters pretended not to know, but the old woman easily guessed what had happened, and as she was in reality a wicked witch, no surprises there, determined to punish the fugitives. Accordingly, she collected 9 different kinds of enchanter's nightshade. Did you know such a thing existed? Enchanted nightshade comes in 9 different varieties. Enchanter's nightshade. Added some salt, which she first bewitched. We're getting the actual recipe. I hope you're taking notes. 9 different kinds of enchanter's nightshade, added some salt, which she first bewitched, and doing all up in a cloth into the shape of a fluffy ball, she sent it after them on the wings of the wind, saying, "Whirlwind, mother of the wind, lend thy aid against her who sinned. Carry with thee this magic ball, cast her from his arms forever, bury her in the rippling river." And how's that going to help you with your gold spinning, witch? At midday, the prince and his men came to a deep river, spanned by so narrow a bridge that only one rider could cross at a time. The horse on which the prince and the maiden were riding had just reached the middle when the magic ball flew by. The horse in its fright suddenly reared, and before anyone could stop, it flung the maiden into the swift current below. The prince tried to jump in after her, but his men held him back, and in spite of his struggles, led him home, where for 6 weeks he shut himself up in a secret chamber and would neither eat nor drink. So he's dead, just like she is, except it's a fairy tale, so he won't be. I think in this case, when they say nor drink, because you can't live 6 weeks without drinking water, they mean nice drinks, like wine and mead and ale and things like that. You know, so great was his grief. Yeah, the sort of things where you would have them accompanying a meal, a special drink, a purposeful drink, rather than just tea, coffee, water, like we do these days. So great was his grief. At last he became so ill his life was despaired of, and in great alarm the king caused all the wizards of his country to be summoned, but none could cure him. No, because it was done by a witch, not a wizard, so they don't know what to do. At last the wind wizard's son said to the king, "Send for the old wizard from Finland." I'm guessing this is a Scandinavian story. He knows more than all the wizards of your kingdom put together. A messenger was at once sent to Finland, and a week later the old wizard himself arrived on the wings of the wind. "Honoured king," said the wizard, "the wind has blown this illness upon your son, and a magic ball has snatched away his beloved. This it is which makes him grieve so constantly. Let the wind blow upon him, that it may blow away his sorrow." Then the king made his son go out into the wind, and he gradually recovered, and told his father all. "Forget the maiden," said the king, "and take another bride." But the prince said he could never love another. A year afterward he came suddenly upon the bridge where his beloved met her death. As he recalled the misfortune, he wept bitterly, and would have given all he possessed to have her once more alive. In the midst of his grief, he thought he heard a voice singing, and looked round, but could see no one. Then he heard the voice again, and it said, "Alas, bewitched and all forsaken, 'tis I must lie for ever here. My beloved no thought has taken to free his bride that was so dear." Because he thought she'd drowned. Of course he didn't think to free her. Because that's what normally happens to humans in rivers that fall under the water and stay under. He was greatly astonished, sprang from his horse, and looked everywhere to see if no one were hidden under the bridge, but no one was there. Then he noticed a yellow water lily floating on the surface of the water, half hidden by its broad leaves. But flowers do not sing, and in great surprise he waited, hoping to hear more. Then again the voice sang, "Alas, bewitched and all forsaken, 'tis I must lie for ever here. My beloved no thought has taken to free his bride that was so dear." The prince suddenly remembered the gold spinners, and said to himself, "If I ride thither, who knows but that they could explain this to me?" He at once rode to the hut and found the two maidens at the fountain. He told them what had befallen their sister the year before, and how he had twice heard a strange song, but yet could see no singer. They said that the yellow water lily could be none other than their sister, who was not dead but transformed by the magic ball. Before he went to bed, the eldest made a cake of magic herbs which she gave him to eat. Obviously, the witch is away on another of her travelling salesman jaunts, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing this. In the night he dreamed that he was living in the forest and could understand all that the birds said to each other. Next morning he told this to the maidens, and they said that the charmed cake had caused it, and advised him to listen well to the birds and see what they could tell him. And when he had recovered his bride, they begged him to return and deliver them from their wretched bondage. Having promised this, he joyfully returned home, and as he was riding through the forest, he could perfectly understand all that the birds said. He heard a thrush say to a magpie, "How stupid men are! They cannot understand the simplest thing. It's now quite a year since the maiden was transformed into a water lily, and though she sings so sadly that anyone going over the bridge must hear her, yet no one comes to her aid. Her former bridegroom rode over it a few days ago and heard her singing, but was no wiser than the rest." "And he is to blame for all her misfortunes," added the magpie. "If he heeds only the words of men, she will remain a flower forever. She was soon delivered were the matter only laid before the old wizard of Finland." The visit of Finland was very important. After hearing this, the prince wondered how he could get a message conveyed to Finland. He heard one swallow say to another, "Come, let us fly to Finland. We can build better nests there." "Stop, kind friends," cried the prince. "Will you do something for me?" The birds consented, and he said, "Take 1,000 greetings from me to the wizard of Finland, and ask him how I may restore a maiden transformed into a flower to her own form." The swallows flew away, and the prince rode on to the bridge. There he waited, hoping to hear the song, but he heard nothing but the rushing of the water and the moaning of the wind, and disappointed rode home. Shortly after, he was sitting in the garden, thinking that the swallows must have forgotten his message, when he saw an eagle flying above him. The bird gradually descended until it perched on a tree close to the prince and said, "The Wizard of Finland greets thee and bids me say that thou mayest free the maiden thus. Go to the river and smear thyself all over with mud. Then say, 'From a man into a crab,' and thou wilt become a crab. Plunge boldly into the water, swim as close as thou canst to the water lily's roots and loosen them from the mud and reeds. This done, fasten thy claws into the roots and rise with them to the surface. Let the water flow all over the flower and drift with the current until thou comest to a mountain ash tree on the left bank. There near it is a large stone. Stop there and say, 'From a crab into a man, from a water lily into a maiden,' and ye both will be restored to your own forms." There you go. Indeed. Full of doubt and fear. What's he got to lose? He's going to get muddy clothes. Full of doubt and fear, the prince let some time pass before he was bold enough to attempt to rescue the maiden. Then a crow said to him, "Why dost thou hesitate? The old wizard has not told thee wrong, neither have the birds deceived thee. Hasten and dry the maiden's tears." He's such a fearful dude. "Nothing worse than death can befall me," thought the prince, "and death is better than endless sorrow." So he mounted his horse and went to the bridge. Again he heard the water lilies lament, and hesitating no longer, smeared himself all over with mud, and saying, "From a man into a crab," plunged into the river. For one moment the water hissed in his ears, then all was silent. He swam up to the plant and began to loosen its roots, but so firmly were they fixed in the mud and reeds that this took him a long time. He then grasped them and rose to the surface, letting the water flow over the flower. The current carried them down the stream, but nowhere could he see the mountain ash. At last he saw it, and close by the large stone. Here he stopped and said, "From a crab into a man, from a water lily into a maiden," and to his delight found himself once more a prince, and the maiden was by his side. She was 10 times more beautiful than before. She's been well hydrated, speaking of which, let's all hydrate, folks. And wore a magnificent pale yellow robe, sparkling with jewels. She thanked him for having freed her from the cruel witch's power and willingly consented to marry him. But when they came to the bridge where he had left his horse, it was nowhere to be seen. For though the prince thought he had been a crab only a few hours, he had in reality been under the water for more than 10 days. While they were wondering how they could reach his father's court, they saw a splendid coach driven by 6 gaily caparisoned, I think that's how you say it, caparisoned horses coming along the bank. In this they drove to the palace. So someone's just sending their carriage, their fancy decorated carriage, out for a drive on its own? Okay. In this they drove to the palace. The king and queen were at church, weeping for their son, whom they had long mourned for dead because he's gone missing again. This time it's 10 days. Great was their delight and astonishment when the prince entered, leading the beautiful maiden by the hand. The wedding was at once celebrated, and then there was feasting and merrymaking throughout the kingdom for 6 weeks. What about the sisters? Naughty, naughty. Some time afterward, this is more than 6 weeks later, sometime afterward, the prince and his bride were sitting in the garden when a crow said to them, "Ungrateful creatures, have you forgotten the 2 poor maidens who helped you in your distress? Must they spin gold flax forever? Have no pity on the old witch. The 3 maidens are princesses whom she stole away when they were children together, with all the silver utensils which she turned into gold flax. Poison were her fittest punishment. The prince was ashamed of having forgotten his promise, and set out at once, and by great good fortune reached the hut when the old woman was away. The maidens had dreamed that he was coming, and were ready to go with him, but first they made a cake in which they put poison, and left it on a table where the old woman was likely to see it when she returned. She did see it, and thought it looked so tempting that she greedily ate it up, at once died. In the secret chamber were found 50 wagon loads of gold flax, and as much more was discovered buried. The hut was razed to the ground, R-A-Z-E-D, not R-A-I-S-E-D, by the way. Razed to the ground, and the prince and his bride and her 2 sisters lived happily ever after. But of course. And we don't know where that story's from, but I'm thinking it's one of the Scandinavian ones. If they're talking about going to Finland to see, or to the Wizard of Finland as being important to the story. So, I don't know. I'm going to cross that one off now that I've read it. The Water Lily, the Gold Spinners. Let's carry on with the next one. What's going to happen next? The Terrible Head. I don't have a chapter number. I only have the name of the chapter. The Terrible Head. Once upon a time there was a king whose only child was a girl. Common in fairy tales. Now the king had been very anxious to have a son, or at least a grandson, to come after him, but he was told by a prophet whom he consulted that his own daughter's son should kill him. This news terrified him so much that he determined never to let his daughter be married, for he thought it was better to have no grandson at all than to be killed by his grandson. He therefore called his workmen together and bade them dig a deep round hole in the earth, and then he had a prison of brass built in the hole, and then when it was finished he locked up his daughter. Fear. Fear is a big motivator in fairy tales. No man ever saw her, and she never saw even the sun, the fields and the sea, but only the sky and the sun. But there was a wide open window in the roof of the house of brass. I would hope that there is drainage so that when it rains and comes in through this hole in the roof, that the water runs away. Otherwise she's going to be in a brass swimming pool. So the princess would sit looking up at the sky and watching the clouds float across and wondering whether she should ever get out of her prison. Now, one day it seemed to her that the sky opened above her and a great shower of shining gold fell through the window in the roof and lay glittering in her room. Not very long after, the princess had a baby. I'm a bit sus about that gold. This is a children's fairy tale. Not very long after, the princess had a baby, all by herself, down in the brass room, prison. A little boy, but when the king, her father, heard of it, he was very angry and afraid, for now the child was born that should be his death. Well, maybe if he hadn't imprisoned her, this wouldn't happen. Yet, cowardly as he was, he had not quite the heart to kill the princess and her baby outright, but he put them in a large brass-bound chest and thrust out to sea, that they might be either drowned or starved, or perhaps come to a country where they would be out of his way. So the princess and the baby floated and drifted in the chest on the sea all day and night. But the baby was not afraid of the waves, nor of the wind, for he did not know that they could hurt him, and he slept quite soundly. And the princess wouldn't know, because she's never been anywhere except for in the brass prison under the ground. And the princess sang a song over him, and this was her song. How does she even know language? I'm sorry, I have so many questions. I thought the Grimm tales were really weird. And ick. This one is starting to head up there too. Child, my child, how sound you sleep, though your mother's care is deep. You can lie with heart at rest in the narrow brass-bound chest. In the starless night and drear, you can sleep and never hear billows breaking and the cry of the night wind wandering by. In soft purple mantles sleeping, with your little face on mine, hear not your mother weeping and the breaking of the brine. That's salty water. Well, the daylight came at last, and the great chest was driven by the waves against the shore of an island. There the brass-bound chest lay, with the princess and her baby in it, till a man of that country came past and saw it, and dragged it onto the beach. And when he had broken it open, behold, there was a beautiful lady and a little boy. Ooh. Is this guy a magician, or a soldier, or a farmer, or a fisherman? Because he could be any of those. So he took them home and was very kind to them, and brought up the boy till he was a young man. Now when the boy had come to his full strength, the king of that country fell in love with his mother and wanted to marry her, but he knew that she would never part from her boy, so he thought of a plan to get rid of the boy. The underlying issue here is the kings. Are you reading this? So he thought of a plan to get rid of the boy, and this was his plan. A great queen of a country not far off was going to be married, and this king said that all his subjects must bring him wedding presents to give her, and he made a feast to which he invited them all. And they all brought their presents. Some brought gold cups, and some brought necklaces of gold and amber, and some brought beautiful horses. But the boy had nothing, though he was the son of a princess, for his mother had nothing to give him. Then the rest of the company began to laugh at him, and the king said, "If you have nothing else to give, at least you might go and fetch the terrible head." The boy was proud and spoke without thinking. "Then I swear that I will bring the terrible head, if it may be brought by a living man." "Oh, that's a good rider on it. But of what head you speak, I know not." Then they told him that somewhere a long way off there dwelt 3 dreadful sisters, monstrous, ogreish women, with golden wings and claws of brass. It's not ogres I know do not have wings and claws of brass. And with serpents growing on their heads instead of hair. Medusa, come in, calling Medusa. Serpents growing on their heads instead of hair. Now these women were so awful to look on that whoever saw them was turned at once into stone. So I wonder what was going on in the world that people in various countries came up with this concept that a woman might have serpents for hair, and if people look at her, or the serpents, they get turned to stone. What triggered this belief? It's very strange. Now these women were so awful to look on that whoever saw them was turned at once into stone, and 2 of them could not be put to death, but the youngest, whose face was very beautiful, could be killed, and it was her head that the boy had promised to bring. You may imagine it was no easy adventure. When he heard all this, he was perhaps sorry that he had sworn to bring the terrible head. Does it have to be severed from the body? Can he not bring the young woman with the head attached, still alive and breathing, and then hold her in front of the king, who's being a bit mean and trying to get rid of the young man, so that the king himself is turned to stone? Would this not be a good thing to do? You don't have to cut her head off. Yeah, he said bring her head, but he didn't actually say you had to cut it off, that I can recall. Sorry, looking for the outs. Looking for the, how can we reinterpret this? Parts of the story. Long experience with fairy tales. But he was determined to keep his oath, so he went out from the feast where they all sat drinking and making merry, and he walked alone beside the sea in the dusk of the evening, at the place where the great chest with himself and his mother in it had been cast ashore. Then he went and sat down on a rock, looking toward the sea and wondering how he should begin to fulfill his vow. Then he felt someone touch him on the shoulder, and he turned and saw a young man, like a king's son, having with him a tall and beautiful lady whose blue eyes shone like stars. They were taller than mortal men, and the young man had a staff in his hand with golden wings on it, and 2 golden serpents twisted round it, and he had wings on his cap and on his shoes. If we know our mythology, we should know who this is. He spoke to the boy and asked him why he was so unhappy, and the boy told him how he had sworn to bring the terrible head, and knew not how to begin to set about the adventure. Then the beautiful lady also spoke, and she said that it was a foolish oath and a hasty, but it might be kept if a brave man had sworn it. Then the boy answered that he was not afraid if only he knew the way. Then the lady said that to kill the dreadful woman with the golden wings and the brass claws, and to cut off her head, he needed 3 things. First, a cap of darkness, which would make him invisible when he wore it. Next, a sword of sharpness, which would cleave iron at one blow. And last, the shoes of swiftness, with which he might fly in the air. Boy answered that he knew not where such things were to be procured, and that wanting them he could only try and fail. Then the young man, taking off his own shoes, said, First you shall use these shoes till you have taken the terrible head, and then you must give them back to me. And with these shoes you will fly as fleet as a bird or a thought over the land or over the waves of the sea, wherever the shoes know the way. So the young man had the shoes that the young woman was talking about. But there are ways which they do not know, roads beyond the borders of the world, and these roads have you to travel. Now first you must go to the 3 grey sisters who live far off in the north, and are so very cold that they have only 1 eye and 1 tooth among the 3. This is starting to sound like a grim tale. Oh dear. You must creep up close to them, and as one of them passes the eye to the other, you must seize it and refuse to give it up till they have told you the way to the 3 fairies of the garden, and they will give you the cap of darkness and the sword of sharpness, and show you how to wing beyond this world to the land of the terrible head. Then the beautiful lady said, Go forth at once, and do not return to say goodbye to your mother. Oh, thank you for the follow. I really do appreciate that. It's lovely to have you here. I'm going to carry on with reading this because I'm getting really confused. This is a very peculiar story. I don't even know which background it comes from because we only find that out at the end of the story sometimes. Do not return to say goodbye to your mother, for these things must be done quickly, and the shoes of swiftness themselves will carry you to the land of the 3 grey sisters, for they know the measure of that way. So the boy thanked her, and he fastened on the shoes of swiftness and turned to say goodbye to the young man and the lady. But behold, they had vanished. He knew not how or where. Then he leapt in the air to try the shoes of swiftness, and they carried him more swiftly than the wind. Over the warm blue sea, over the happy lands of the south, over the northern peoples who drank mare's milk and lived in great wagons. That's probably the people of Mongolia that drink mare's milk and live in great wagons, wandering after their flocks, across the wide rivers where the wild fowl rose and fled before him, and over the plains and the cold North Sea he went, over the fields of snow and the hills of ice, to a place where the world ends. And the hills of ice, read that bit, and the hills of ice, to a place where the world ends, and all water is frozen, and there are no men, nor beasts, nor any green grass. There, in a blue cave of the ice, he found the 3 grey sisters, the oldest of living things. Their hair was as white as the snow, and their flesh of an icy blue, and they mumbled and nodded in a kind of dream, and their frozen breath hung around them like a cloud. Now the opening of the cave in the ice was narrow, and it was not easy to pass in without touching one of the Grey Sisters, but floating on the shoes of swiftness, the boy just managed to steal in, and waited till one of the sisters said to another who had their one eye, "Sister, what do you see? Do you see old times coming back?" "No, sister." "Then give me the eye, for perhaps I can see further than you." Then the first sister passed the eye to the second, but as the second groped for it, the boy caught it cleverly out of her hand. "Where is the eye, sister?" said the second grey woman. "You have taken it yourself, sister," said the first grey woman. "Have you lost the eye, sister? Have you lost the eye?" said the third grey woman. "Shall we never find it again and see old times coming back?" Then the boy slipped from behind them out of the cold cave into the air, and he laughed aloud. When the grey woman heard that laugh, they began to weep, for now they knew that a stranger had robbed them, and that they could not help themselves, and their tears froze as they fell from the hollows where no eyes were, and rattled on the icy ground of the cave. Then they began to implore the boy to give them their eye back, and he could not help being sorry for them, they were so pitiful, but he said he would never give them the eye till they told him the way to the fairies of the garden. Then they wrung their hands miserably, for they guessed why he had come, and now he was going to try to win the terrible head. Now the dreadful women were akin to the three Grey Sisters, and it was, I think they mean kin, not akin. Akin, modern usage, means very like, whereas kin means related. And I think it's related. The dreadful women were akin to the three Grey Sisters, and it was hard for them to tell the boy the way, but at last they told him to keep always south, and with the land on his left and the sea on his right, till he reached the island of the fairies of the garden. Then he gave them back the eye, and they began to look out once more for the old times coming back again. But the boy flew south between sea and land, keeping the land always to his left hand, till he saw a beautiful island crowned with flowering trees. There he alighted, and there he found the three fairies of the garden. They were like three very beautiful young women, dressed one in green, one in white, and one in red, and they were dancing and singing around an apple tree with apples of gold, and this was their song. The song of the western fairies. Round and round the apples of gold, round and round dance we. Thus do we dance from the days of old about the enchanted tree. Round and round we go, while the spring is green, or the stream shall flow, or the wind shall stir the sea. There is none may taste of the golden fruit till the golden new time come. Many a tree shall spring from shoot, many a blossom be withered at root, many a song be dumb. Broken and still shall be many a lute, or ever the new times come. Round and round the tree of gold, round and round dance we, so doth the great world spin from of old, summer and winter and fire and cold, song that is sung and tale that is told, even as we dance that fold and unfold round the stem of the fairy tree. Not quite sure how this information is useful, but there you go. These grave dancing fairies were very unlike the Grey Women, and they were glad to see the boy and treated him kindly. They asked him why he had come, and he told them how he was sent to find the sword of sharpness and the cap of darkness, and the fairies gave him these, and a wallet and a shield, and belted the sword, which had a diamond blade, round his waist, and the cap they set on his head, and told him that now even they could not see him, though they were fairies. Then he took it off, and they each kissed him and wished him good fortune, and then they began again their eternal dance round the golden tree, for it is their business to guard it, till the new times come, or till the world's ending. So the boy put the cap on his head, and hung the wallet around his waist, and the shining shield on his shoulders, and flew beyond the great river that lies coiled like a serpent round the whole world. Obviously he's been told where to go now, and by the banks of that river there he found the three terrible women, all asleep beneath a poplar tree. Why poplar? Maybe there's some significance. Maybe there is some magical property that poplar has in mythology. And the dead poplar leaves lay all about them. Their golden wings were folded and their brass claws were crossed. And two of them slept with their hideous heads beneath their wings like birds, and the serpents in their hair writhed out from under the feathers of gold. But the youngest slept between the two sisters, and she lay on her back with her beautiful sad face turned to the sky. And though she slept, her eyes were wide open. If the boy had seen her, he would have been changed into stone by the terror and the pity of it. She was so awful. But he had thought of a plan for killing her without looking at her face. As soon as he caught sight of the three from far off, he took his shining shield from his shoulders and held it up like a mirror. Of course, we know this from fables elsewhere. So that he saw the dreadful women reflected in it and did not see the terrible head itself. Then he came nearer and nearer, till he reckoned that he was within a sword's stroke of the youngest, and he guessed where he should strike a back blow behind him. Then he drew the sword of sharpness and struck once, and the terrible head was cut from the shoulders of the creature, and the blood leapt out and struck him like a blow, but he thrust the terrible head into his wallet, not the sort of wallet we're used to, obviously, and flew away without looking behind. Then the two dreadful sisters who were left wakened and rose in the air like great birds, and though they could not see him because of his cap of darkness, they flew after him up the wind, following by the scent through the clouds like hounds hunting in a wood. Of course they were. They came so close that he could hear the clatter of their golden wings and their shrieks to each other. Here, no, there, this way he went, as they chased him. But the shoes of swiftness flew too fast for them, and at last their cries and the rattle of their wings died away as he crossed the great river that runs round the world. Now, when the horrible creatures were far in the distance and the boy found himself on the right side of the river, he flew straight eastward, trying to seek his own country. But as he looked down from the air, he saw a very strange sight. A beautiful girl chained to a stake at the high water mark of the sea. The girl was so frightened or so tired that she was only prevented from falling by the iron chain around her waist, and there she hung as if she were dead. The boy was very sorry for her and flew down and stood beside her. When he spoke, she raised her head and looked round, but his voice only seemed to frighten her. Then he remembered that he was wearing the cap of darkness, and that she could only hear him, not see him, so he took it off, and there he stood before her, the handsomest young man she had ever seen in all her life, with short curly yellow hair and blue eyes and a laughing face, and he thought her the most beautiful girl in the world. So first, with one blow of the sword of sharpness, he cut the iron chain that bound her, and then he asked her what she did there, and why men treated her so cruelly. And she told him that she was the daughter of the king of that country, and that she was tied there to be eaten by a monstrous beast out of the sea. For the beast came and devoured a girl every day. Now the lot had fallen to her, and as she was just saying this, a long, fierce head of a cruel sea creature rose out of the waves and snapped at the girl. But the beast had been too greedy and too hurried, so he missed his aim the first time. Before he could rise and bite again, the boy had whipped the terrible head out of the wallet and held it up. And when the sea beast leapt out once more, its eyes fell on the head, and instantly it was turned into a stone. And the stone beast is there on the sea coast to this day. Then the boy and girl went to the palace of the king, her father, where everyone was weeping for her death, and they could hardly believe their eyes when they saw her come back well. And the king and queen made much of the boy and could not contain themselves for delight when they found he wanted to marry their daughter. So the two were married with the most splendid rejoicings, and when they had passed some time at court, they went home in a ship to the boy's own country, for he could not carry his bride through the air. So he took the shoes of swiftness and the cap of darkness and the sword of sharpness up to a lonely place in the hills. There he left them, and there they were found by the man and woman who had met him at home beside the sea and had helped him to start on his journey. So he's returning their goods. When this had been done, the boy and his bride set forth for home and landed at the harbour of his native land. But whom should he meet in the very street of the town but his own mother, flying for her life from the wicked king, who now wished to kill her because he found that she would never marry him. Entitlement. For if she had liked the king ill before, she liked him far worse now that he had caused her son to disappear so suddenly. She did not know, of course, where the boy had gone, but thought the king had slain him secretly. So now she was running for her very life, and the wicked king was following her with a sword in his hands. Then, behold, she ran into her son's very arms, but he had only time to kiss her and step in front of her, when the king struck at him with his sword. The boy caught the blow on his shield and cried to the king, "I swore to bring you the terrible head, and see how I keep my oath." Then he drew forth the head from his wallet, and when the king's eyes fell on it, instantly he was turned into stone, just as he stood there with his sword lifted. Oh, what marvellous sculptures you have, and statues in your town. They're so realistic. Wonderful. Now all the people rejoiced because the wicked king should rule them no longer, and they asked the boy to be their king, but he said no, he must take his mother home to her father's house. So the people chose for king the man who had been kind to his mother when first she was cast on the island in the great chest. But of course, actually she'd probably happily marry him. Presently the boy and his mother and his wife, the girl, who's now his wife, the princess, set sail for his mother's own country, from which she had been driven so unkindly. But on the way they stayed at the court of a king, and it happened that he was holding games and giving prizes to the best runners, boxers, and quoits throwers. That's those rope rings. There's a very, very old-fashioned game long before the days of horseshoes called quoits. And you throw those rope rings to land over a stick. The more modern iteration is using materials you have with horseshoes. Then the boy would try his strength with the rest, but he threw the quoit so far that it went beyond what had ever been thrown before and fell in the crowd, striking a man so that he died. Now this man was no other than the father of the boy's mother. It was not malicious intent, who had fled away from his own kingdom for fear his grandson should find him and kill him after all. Thus he was destroyed by his own cowardice and by chance, and thus the prophecy was fulfilled. But the boy and his wife and his mother went back to the kingdom that was theirs and lived long and happily after all their trouble. And where did the terrible head go? Maybe he kept it in storage in case they ever needed it. Oh my goodness, that was a weird one. It went all over the place. That story. Oh, so strange. I'll just cross that one off so I know I've read it. I don't need to read it. I mean, it was a good story, but it's not like I need to read it again straight away or anything like that. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for appreciating the commentary too. As you can see from the grey hair, I'm fairly old, so there's some of the things referenced in these stories I either have first-hand experience of or because of my reading background, because I read lots of books as a kid and I've always loved information. I have found out things along the way, and without meaning to, my ADHD means that there is no barrier for me saying something, and the autism mean that I gather information. It just comes out along the way. But also you get all the, well, that was a weird thing for them to say sort of thing in response. Goriki says, Jill is a glowing box of chocolates. Jill Tear, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for saying something too. Really, really appreciate that. That really makes a difference to whether people get marked as we better keep an eye on this. They might be a scammer or a spammer or a bot. If you actually do engage in chat, then you're likely, if you are going to get a mod note on your account, it'll probably say, not that you can see it, but for us as people to do with this channel and any other associated one, it means that everyone can see this is a known person, they're okay sort of thing, if that sort of note is put on there. Because we're very proactive about making sure that we don't get bad players in here. One of the reasons why, and I did a big clear out of followers a while back, people who had followed me 5 years ago I've never seen since. They don't need to be here, because anyone who's following me, if someone gifts subs, anyone who follows me, as well as anyone who's in chat, is eligible to receive those subs. So if you want the people who regularly turn up to a channel to receive gift subs, then it's a good idea to reduce the load of no-shows. So yeah, that's what that's about. Actually, I'm just going to run a tip video. It's very, very short. It will be no more than 3 minutes. Just ways you can make the most of your time here to get to enjoy it and look after yourself, etc. So here we go. I don't know who we're going to get. It's always a random pull as to who we get for the tip video. So sit back, enjoy, and then I'll carry on with reading the story.
Hello, and welcome to the stream. I'm Jev. Now, let's talk about our 6 things to enjoy the stream. Number 1, get your drink. It can be water, whatever you like, but, take care of yourself and hydrate. Number 2, when I hydrate, you should as well. Did you hydrate just now? Number 2, get snacks or maybe a whole meal. It depends on your time of day and your own habits. Again, take care of yourself. Be hydrated and eat what you need to eat. Number 4, get comfy, whether it's cooler or warmer, just something to cuddle perhaps. But be comfortable. That's also important. It's good physically and mentally. Number 5, have something to write with and write on. It can be paper, it can be anything you like. Memo, post-it notes, whatever you like. This advert not associated with post-it notes in any way, shape, or form. Disclaimer. Now, sit back, listen, and enjoy. Feel free to engage in chat. Do the puzzle over here or, down there somewhere. Play Jev Bingo. I do silly things like, I do silly things. Or you can spend pages and make me wear silly things like funny ears, like this one. Have a good stream.
And welcome back. So we'll carry on. With this one, we're going to have a more familiar story. It is called The Story of Pretty Goldilocks. I'm assuming from the name of the character that it's the story we know. But I don't actually know. We're going to find out. And by the way, that previous one, it also didn't tell us where the source was for that story, which I'm disappointed with. Some of the ones do, some of them don't. So we'll see what happens. So let's see if this is one that we know or if it's a different one. Once upon a time, there was a princess who was the prettiest creature in the world, because apparently that was important. And because she was so beautiful, and because her hair was like the finest gold and waved and rippled nearly to the ground, that would be a pain to look after. Oh. She was called Pretty Goldilocks. Her name was Pretty Goldilocks, not Goldilocks, but Pretty Goldilocks. Okay. She always wore a crown of flowers, and her dresses were embroidered with diamonds and pearls. Okay, this is not the forester's daughter who lives at the edge of the woods, who goes wandering in there to eat bears' food, by the sound of it. Her dresses were embroidered with diamonds and pearls, and everybody who saw her fell in love with her. Now, one of her neighbours was a young king who was not married. He was very rich and handsome. And when he heard all that was said about Pretty Goldilocks, though he had never seen her, he fell so deeply in love with her that he could neither eat nor drink. Love at first not sight. Yeah, apparently it's a real thing. So he resolved to send an ambassador to ask her in marriage. He had a splendid carriage made for his ambassador, and gave him more than 100 horses and 100 servants, and told him to be sure and bring the princess back with him. After he had started, nothing else was talked of at court, and the king felt so sure that the princess would consent that he set his people to work at pretty dresses and splendid furniture. that they might be ready by the time she came. Meanwhile, the ambassador arrived at the princess's palace and delivered his little message, but whether she happened to be cross that day or whether the compliment did not please her is not known. She only answered that she was very much obliged to the king, but she had no wish to be married. The ambassador set off sadly on his homeward way, bringing all the king's presents back with him, for the princess was too well brought up to accept the pearls and diamonds, when she would not accept the king, so she had only kept 25 English pins, that he might not be vexed. Once upon a time they were very valuable. Not as valuable as gems, though. When the ambassador reached the city, where the king was waiting impatiently, everybody was very much annoyed with him for not bringing the princess, and the king cried like a baby, and nobody could console him. Why is he not going and meeting her and getting to know her himself? Maybe that's the moral of the story. I don't know. Anyway, we'll find out shortly. Now, there was at the court a young man who was more clever and handsome than anyone else. He was called Charming. But he's not the king. Is he a prince, though? And everyone loved him, excepting a few very envious people who were angry at his being the king's favourite and knowing all the state secrets. He happened to one day be with some people who were speaking of the ambassador's return and saying that his going to the princess had not done much good, when Charming said rashly, "If the king had sent me to the Princess Goldilocks, I am sure she would have come back with me." Oh dear. Such a setup. His enemies at once went to the king and said, "You will hardly believe, sire, what Charming had the audacity to say, that if he had been sent to the Princess Goldilocks, she would certainly have come back with him. He seems to think that he is so much handsomer than you that the princess would have fallen in love with him and followed him willingly." Well, the king did not go, so she couldn't fall in love with the king anyway. It was the ambassador who went. Logic, guys. The king was very angry when he heard this. "Ha!" said he. "Does he laugh at my unhappiness and think himself more fascinating than I am?" No words. "Go and let him be shut up in my great tower to die of hunger." So the king's guards were sent to fetch Charming, who had thought no more of his rash speech, and carried him off to prison with great cruelty. The poor prisoner had only a little straw for his bed, but for a little stream of water which flowed through the tower, he would have died of thirst. One day, when he was in despair, he said to himself, "How can I have offended the king? I am his most faithful subject and have done nothing against him." The king chanced to be passing the tower and recognized the voice of his former favourite. He stopped to listen in spite of Charming's enemies, who tried to persuade him to have nothing more to do with the traitor. But the king said, "Be quiet. I wish to hear what he says." And then he opened the tower door and called to Charming, who came very sadly and kissed the king's hand, saying, "What have I done, sire, to deserve this cruel treatment?" "You mocked me and my ambassador," said the king, "and you said that if I'd sent you for a Princess Goldilocks, you would certainly have brought her back." "It is quite true, sire," replied Charming. "I should have drawn such a picture of you and represented your good qualities in such a way that I'm certain the princess would have found you irresistible, but I cannot see what there is in that to make you angry." The king could not see any cause for anger either when the matter was presented to him in this light, and he began to frown very fiercely at his courtiers who had so misrepresented his favourite. So he took Charming back to the palace with him, and after seeing that he had a very good supper, to make up for all those missed meals that he was meant to be starving to death from, said to him, "You know that I love pretty Goldilocks as much as ever. Her refusal has not made any difference to me, but I do not know how to make her change her mind. I really should like to send you to see if you can persuade her to marry me." I really don't know about this king. He seems too easily swayed by persuasive people, and doesn't seem to think it worthwhile his actually meeting the girl and letting her choose for herself. Charming replied that he was perfectly willing to go and would set out the very next day. "But you must wait till I can get a grand escort for you," said the king. But Charming said that he only wanted a good horse to ride, and the king, who was delighted at his being ready to start so promptly, gave him letters to the princess and bade him good speed. It was on a Monday morning that he set out all alone upon his errand, thinking of nothing but how he could persuade the Princess Goldilocks to marry the king. He had a writing block in his pocket, and whenever any happy thought struck him, he dismounted from his horse and sat down under the trees to put it into the harangue with which he was preparing for the princess before he forgot it. Harangue. Not a good word to use when describing what you are going to do to persuade somebody. Let's see if my thing's an impassioned, disputatious public speech. Let's see if there's another version of it. Sometimes they're really long, which is the definitions. To give a forceful and lengthy lecture or criticism to someone. That's the use that we're more familiar with. So I don't know if haranguing her is really going to persuade her that the king is a nice guy to marry, that she wants to fall in love with having never seen him. Yeah. So he's writing down a harangue. I never heard of that before. One day when he had started at the very earliest dawn and was riding over a great meadow, he suddenly had a capital idea, and springing from his horse, he sat down under a willow tree which grew by a little river. When he had written it down, he was looking round him, pleased to find himself in such a pretty place, when all at once he saw a great golden carp, type of fish, lying gasping and exhausted upon the grass. In leaping after little flies, she had thrown herself high upon the bank, where she had lain till she was nearly dead. Charming had pity upon her, and though he couldn't help thinking she would have been very nice for dinner, he picked her up gently and put her back into the water. As soon as Dame Carp felt the refreshing coolness of the water, she sank down joyfully to the bottom of the river. Then, swimming up to the bank, quite boldly, she said, "Thank you, Charming, for the kindness you have done me. You have saved my life. One day I will repay you." So saying, she sank down into the water again, leaving Charming greatly astonished at her politeness. Another day, as he journeyed on, he saw a raven in great distress. The poor bird was closely pursued by an eagle, which would soon have eaten it up. But had not Charming quickly fitted an arrow to his bow and shot the eagle dead. I'm not quite sure what Charming thinks the eagle is meant to live off. But yeah, this is the way of fairy tales. The raven perched upon a tree very joyfully. "Charming," said he, "it was very generous of you to rescue a poor raven. I am not ungrateful. Some day I will repay you." Charming thought it very nice of the raven to say so, and went on his way. Before the sun rose, he found himself in a thick wood, where it was too dark for him to see his path, and there he heard an owl crying as if it were in despair. "Hark," said he, "that must be an owl in great trouble. I'm sure it has gone into a snare." And he began to hunt about, and presently found a great net which some bird catchers had spread the night before. "What a pity it is that men do nothing but torment and persecute poor creatures which never do them any harm," said he, and he took out his knife and cut the cords of the net, and the owl flitted away into the darkness. But then, turning with one flicker of her wings, she came back to Charming and said, "It does not need many words to tell you how great a service you have done me. I was caught. In a few minutes the fowlers would have been here. Without your help I should have been killed. I am grateful, and one day I will repay you. My best owl, look." These 3 adventures were the only ones of any consequence that befell Charming upon his journey, and he made all haste he could to reach the palace of Princess Goldilocks. When he arrived, he thought everything he saw delightful and magnificent. Diamonds were as plentiful as pebbles, and the gold and silver, the beautiful dresses, the sweetmeats and pretty things that were everywhere quite amazed him. So she wouldn't have been impressed by anything that the king sent if he was trying to impress her. He thought to himself, If the princess consents to leave all this and come with me to marry the king, he may think himself lucky." Then he dressed himself carefully in rich brocade with scarlet and white plumes, and threw a splendid embroidered scarf over his shoulder, and looking as gay and as graceful as possible, he presented himself at the door of the palace, carrying in his arm a tiny, pretty dog which he had bought on the way. The guards saluted him respectfully, and a messenger was sent to the princess to announce the arrival of Charming as an ambassador for her neighbour king. Bold of Charming to judge the hunters when he just a few moments ago killed an eagle. I know. But that's kind of the way a lot of these old stories work. Mind you, a lot of modern ones do too. And in real life we do. We go, this is okay, but that's not. Or we condemn something and we very loudly condemn something and then turn around and do something that's an equivalent. "Charming," said the princess, "the name promises well. I have no doubt that he is good-looking and fascinates everybody." What's going to happen if she falls in love with him instead of the king? Which it should happen, we know. "The name promises well. I have no doubt that he is good-looking and fascinates everybody." "Indeed he does, madam," said all her maids of honour in one breath. "Indeed he does, madam." Oh, my heart is fluttering. "We saw him from the window of the garret where we were spinning flax." Why would her maids be spinning flax in the attic? She's a princess. They're meant to be in her quarters working on stuff, and their workrooms next to her space. But spinning, that's done by people who are employed to spin. And weavers then take the spun thread. We could set up here. Sorry, let's carry on. "We saw him from the window of the garret where we were spinning flax. We could do nothing but look at him as long as he was in sight." "Well, to be sure," said the princess, "that's how you amuse yourselves, is it? Looking at strangers out of the window. Be quick and give me my blue satin embroidered dress and comb out my golden hair. Let somebody make me fresh garlands of flowers and give me my high-heeled shoes and my fan and tell them to sweep my great hall and my throne, for I want everyone to say I am really pretty Goldilocks." One of the perils of being born and always being seen to be beautiful. Born beautiful and always seen to be beautiful. Lack of development of character. Because everyone falls over themselves to say how wonderful you are. And they don't require anything of you in terms of self-improvement. I mean, someone can choose to be a nicer person, but in everything is handed to you and you have an expectation. You can imagine how all her maids scurried this way and that to make the princess ready, and how in their haste they knocked their heads together and hindered each other till she thought they would never have done. However, at last they led her into the gallery of mirrors that she might assure herself that nothing was lacking in her appearance. And then she mounted her throne of gold, ebony, and ivory, while her ladies took their guitars and began to sing softly. Then Charming was led in, and was so struck with astonishment and admiration that at first not a word could he say. But presently he took courage and delivered his harangue, bravely ending by begging the princess to spare him the disappointment of going back without her. "Sir Charming," answered she, "all the reasons you have given me are very good ones, and I assure you that I should have more pleasure in obliging you than anyone else." Yes, you are rather easy on the eye, Charming. "But you must know that a month ago I was walking by the river with my ladies. I took off my glove, and as I did so a ring that I was wearing slipped off my finger and rolled into the water. As I valued it more than my kingdom, you can imagine how vexed I was at losing it. I vowed never to listen to any proposal of marriage unless the ambassador first brought me back my ring. So now you know what is expected of you, for if you talked for 15 days and 15 nights, you could not make me change my mind." Charming was very much surprised by this answer, but he bowed low to the princess and begged her to accept the embroidered scarf and the tiny dog he had brought with him. But she answered that she did not want any presents, and that he was to remember that she had just told him. When he got back to his lodging, he went to bed without eating any supper, and his little dog, who I call Frisk, couldn't eat either, but came and lay down close to him. All night Charming sighed and lamented. "How am I going to find a ring that fell into the river a month ago?" said he. "It's useless to try. The princess must have told me to do it on purpose, knowing it was impossible." And then he sighed again. Frisk heard him and said, "My dear master, don't despair. The luck may change. You are too good not to be happy. Let us go down to the river as soon as it is light." But Charming only gave him 2 little pats and said nothing, and very soon he fell asleep. Maybe Charming didn't understand him. Maybe he doesn't speak dog. At first glimmer of dawn, Frisk began to jump about, and when he had waked Charming, they went out together, first into the garden, and then down to the river's brink, where they wandered up and down. Charming was thinking sadly of having to go back unsuccessful when he heard someone calling, "Charming, Charming." He looked about him and thought he must be dreaming, as he could not see anybody. Then he walked on, and the voice called again, "Charming, Charming." "Who calls me?" said he. Frisk, who was very small and could look closely into the water, cried out, "I see a golden carp coming." And sure enough, there was the great carp, who said to Charming, "You saved my life in the meadow by the willow tree, and I promised that I would repay you. Take this. It is Princess Goldilocks' ring." Do all the animals hear all conversations? Charming took the ring out of Dame Carp's mouth, thanking her 1,000 times, and he and tiny Frisk went straight to the palace, where someone told the princess that he was asking to see her. "Ah, poor fellow," said she, "he must have come to say goodbye, finding it impossible to do as I asked." So in came Charming, who presented her with the ring and said, "Madam, I have done your bidding. Will it please you to marry my master?" When the princess saw her ring brought back to her unhurt, she was so astonished that she thought she must be dreaming. "Truly, Charming," said she, "you must be the favourite of some fairy, or you could never have found it. I did such hard work to make sure it was unfindable." "Madam," answered he, "I was helped by nothing but my desire to obey your wishes," which is actually a lie, because he was helped by the golden carp. But maybe he doesn't want her to know that. "Since you are so kind," said she, "perhaps you will do me another service, for till it is done I will never be married. There is a prince not far from here whose name is Galifron, who once wanted to marry me, but when I refused he uttered the most terrible threats against me, and vowed that he would lay waste to my country. But what could I do? I could not marry a frightful giant as tall as a tower, who eats up people as a monkey eats chestnuts." Monkeys eat chestnuts? The things you learn when you read fairy tales. "And who talks so loud that anybody who has to listen to him becomes quite deaf. Nevertheless, he does not cease to persecute me and to kill my subjects. So before I can listen to your proposal, you must kill him and bring me his head." Charming was rather dismayed at this command. I'd be asking if she's going to have a whole lot of other conditions as well. But he answered, "Very well, Princess, I will fight this Galifron. I believe that he will kill me, but at any rate I shall die in your defence." Excuse me, itchy eye. Anyone who's been here long will know that if I get an itch, I really have to do something about it, because otherwise I won't even be able to read a sentence properly. Sometimes I have a hard time with them anyway. Then the princess was frightened and said everything she could think of to prevent Charming from fighting the giant. Why is she frightened? She doesn't want to go and marry the king. That's why she's throwing all these barriers in the way. And now she's frightened because he said, "You're sending me out to be killed, but okay, I'll be killed if that's what's going to be the right thing to do." And that frightens her. But it was of no use, and he went out to arm himself suitably, and then taking little Frisk with him, he mounted his horse and set out for Gallifron's country. Everyone he met told him what a terrible giant Gallifron was, and that nobody dared go near him, and the more he heard, the more frightened he grew. Frisk tried to encourage him by saying, "While you are fighting the giant, dear master, I will go and bite his heels, and when he stoops down to look at me, you can kill him." That's a very brave little dog, isn't it? Charming praised his little dog's plan, but knew that this help would not do much good. At last he drew near the giant's castle, and saw to his horror that every path that led to it was strewn with bones. Before long he saw Gallifron coming. His head was higher than the tallest trees, and he sang in a terrible voice, "Bring out your little boys and girls, pray do not stay to do their curls, for I shall eat so very many, I shall not know if they have any." Maybe giants are not good at poetry. Thereupon Charming sang out as loud as he could to the same tune, "Come out and meet the valiant Charming, who finds you not at all alarming. Although he's not very tall, he's big enough to make you fall." The rhymes were not very correct, but you see he had made them up so quickly that it is a miracle that they were not worse. Well, tall and fall rhyme, and charming and alarming rhymes. So where's the problem? I think it's more the rhythm rather than the rhyme. It's a miracle that they were not worse, especially as he was horribly frightened at the time. When Gallifron heard these words, he looked all about him and saw Charming standing sword in hand. This put the giant into a terrible rage, and he aimed... Sorry, I just need to put in here a note that it's missing a bit of punctuation. Right, done. I do that sometimes because sometimes I think, oh, maybe I can submit the information to the readers over at distributed proofreaders. This put the giant into a terrible rage, and he aimed a blow at Charming with his huge iron club, which would certainly have killed him if it had reached him. But at that instant a raven perched upon the giant's head, and pecking with its strong beak and beating with its great wings, so confused and blinded him that all his blows fell harmlessly upon the air, and Charming, rushing in, gave him several strokes with his sharp sword, so that he fell to the ground, whereupon Charming cut off his head before he knew anything about it. And the raven from a tree close by croaked out, "You see, I have not forgotten the good turn you did me in killing the eagle. Today I think I have fulfilled my promise in repaying you." "Indeed, I owe you more gratitude than you ever owed me," replied Charming, and then he mounted his horse and rode off with Gallifron's head, proof of having done it. When he reached the city, the people ran after him in crowds, crying, "Behold the brave Charming who has killed the giant!" And their shouts reached the princess's ear, but she dared not ask what was happening for fear she should hear that Charming had been killed. I think she might have gone for him instead. But very soon he arrived at the palace with the giant's head, of which she was still terrified, though it could no longer do her any harm. "Princess," said Charming, "I have killed your enemy. I hope you will now consent to marry the king, my master." "Oh dear, no," said the princess, "not until you have brought me some water from the gloomy cavern." Told you, endless list of jobs to do. Should have asked what other conditions there were. "Not far from here there is a deep cave, the entrance to which is guarded by 2 dragons with fiery eyes who will not allow anyone to pass them. When you get into the cavern you will find an immense hole which you must go down, and it is full of toads and snakes. At the bottom of this hole there is another little cave," so Indiana Jones territory by the sound of it, "in which rises the fountain of health and beauty. It is some of this water that I really must have. Everything it touches becomes wonderful." Are we finding out the source of prettiest Goldilocks? Does she need this because otherwise she's not going to be pretty when she sees the king? The beautiful things will always remain beautiful, and the ugly things become lovely. If one is young, one never grows old, and if one is old, one becomes young. You see, Charming, I could not leave my kingdom without taking some of it with me, because her beauty is so important to her. Because she's going to live long after the king has died, and she'll still be young and beautiful. Oh dear. I wonder if any of these concerns will be addressed in this story. Princess, said he, you at least can never need this water, but I am an unhappy ambassador whose death you desire. Where you send me, I will go, though I know I shall never return. And as Princess Goldilocks showed no sign of relenting, he started, with his little dog, for the gloomy cavern. Everyone he met on the way said, what a pity that a handsome young man should throw away his life so carelessly. I have an objection. I'm sorry. Let's drink from deeply of the shame bottle against all fairy tales that do this. What a pity that a handsome young man should throw away his life so carelessly. If he had been ugly, they would have said, go at it. We don't care. It's only handsome and pretty and beautiful and young that are valued and have enough value to be allowed to live and thrive, according to fairy tales and according to a lot of society mores these days, or mores, depending on how you want to say it. Not good to live by. Don't do it. Okay? Don't take that attitude. Don't say when somebody dies, oh, it's such a shame they died. They're too beautiful. They oughtn't to have died. That's saying that people who aren't beautiful deserve to die. That's not how life is meant to work, okay? Somebody is young, they don't deserve to die. Well, who does deserve to die? Mass murderers and other things, those engaging in repeated SA, and you know exactly what I mean. Those are the only ones who deserve it. Don't say that someone's merit is because of their youth or their beauty. That does not give them any more right than anyone else to live. Okay? There, rant over. Let's carry on with the story. What a pity that a handsome young man should throw away his life so carelessly. He's going to the cavern alone, though if he had 100 men with him, he could not succeed. Maybe it's because he's going on his own, he will succeed. Why does the princess ask him possibilities? Charming said nothing, but he was very sad. When he was near the top of a hill, he dismounted to let his horse graze, while Frisk amused himself by chasing butterflies. Charming knew he could not be far from the gloomy cavern, and on looking about him he saw a black, hideous rock from which came a thick smoke. Actually, you'd see the smoke before you saw the rock. Followed in a moment by one of the dragons with fires blazing from his mouth and eyes. His body was yellow and green, and his claws scarlet, and his tail was so long that it lay in 100 coils. Frisk was so terrified at the sight of it that he did not know where to hide. Charming, quite determined to get the water or die, now drew his sword, and taking the crystal flask which pretty Goldilocks had given him to fill, said to Frisk, I feel sure that I shall never come back from this expedition. When I am dead, go to the princess and tell her that her errand has cost me my life. Then find the king my master and relate all my adventures to him, and tell him that his errand has cost me my life. That last bit was me, sorry. As he spoke, he heard a voice calling, Charming, Charming. Who calls me? Said he. Then he saw an owl sitting in a hollow tree, who said to him, You saved my life when I was caught in the net. Now I can repay you. Trust me with the flask, for I know all the ways of the gloomy cavern, and can fill it from the fountain of beauty. Charming was only too glad to give her the flask, and she flitted into the cavern quite unnoticed by the dragon, and after some time returned with the flask, filled to the very brim with sparkling water. Charming thanked her with all his heart and joyfully hastened back to the town. So, no sip himself? He went straight to the palace and gave the flask to the princess, who had no further objection to make. So she thanked Charming and ordered that preparations should be made for her departure, and they soon set out together. The princess found Charming such an agreeable companion that she sometimes said to him, "Why didn't we stay where we were? I could have made you king, and we should have been so happy." But Charming only answered, "I could not have done anything that would have vexed my master so much, even for a kingdom, or to please you, though I think you are as beautiful as the sun." At last they reached the king's great city, and he came out to meet the princess, bringing magnificent presents, and the marriage was celebrated with great rejoicing. Fireworks, fireworks, so much excitement. But Goldilocks was so fond of Charming that she could not be happy unless he was near her, and she was always singing his praises. The king's going to get jealous. "If it hadn't been for Charming," she said to the king, "I should never have come here. You ought to be very much obliged to him, for he did the most impossible things and got me water from the Fountain of Beauty, so I can never grow old and shall get prettier every year." Then Charming's enemies said to the king, "It's a wonder that you're not jealous. The queen thinks there is nobody in the world like Charming, as if anybody you had sent could not have done just as much." Well, nobody he sent did do as much, did they? "It is quite true, now I come to think of it," said the king. "Let him be chained hand and foot and thrown into the tower." Here we go. The king, so easily swayed, he fell in love with this girl. He'd never seen her. Shouldn't be ruling a country, should he? Thrown into the tower. So they took Charming, and as a reward for having served the king so faithfully, he was shut up in the tower, where he only saw the jailer, who brought him a piece of black bread and a pitcher of water every day. Well, at least this time he's not locked up there till he starves to death. Black bread usually means it's peasant's bread. It's like made out of rye and a whole lot of other stuff like that, which actually is surprisingly healthy. It's just rough. It's a lot of fiber in it. So yeah, but not white bread that has been sifted within an inch of its life and has very little nutrition in it. So a piece of black bread and a pitcher of water every day. However, little Frisk came to console him and told him all the news. When pretty Goldilocks heard what had happened, she threw herself at the king's feet and begged him to set Charming free. But the more she cried, the more angry he was. And at last she saw that it was useless to say any more, but it made her very sad. Then the king took it into his head that perhaps he was not handsome enough to please the Princess Goldilocks, and he thought he would bathe his face with the water from the Fountain of Beauty, which was in the flask on a shelf in the princess's room. I think you meant to consume it, not wear it. Where she had placed it, that she might see it often. Now it happened that one of the princess's ladies, in chasing a spider, had knocked the flask off the shelf and broken it, and every drop of the water had been spilt. Not knowing what to do, she'd hastily swept away the pieces of crystal, and then remembered that in the king's room she had seen a flask of exactly the same shape, also filled with sparkling water. So without saying a word, she fetched it and stood it upon the queen's shelf. Now the water in this flask was what was used in the kingdom for getting rid of troublesome people. Instead of having their heads cut off in the usual way, their faces were bathed with the water, and they instantly fell asleep and never woke up any more. So when the king, thinking to improve his beauty, took the flask and sprinkled the water upon his face, he fell asleep, and nobody could wake him. Little Frisk was the first to hear the news, and he ran to tell Charming, who sent him to beg the princess not to forget the poor prisoner. All the palace was in confusion on account of the king's death. He's asleep. Coma, but tiny Frisk made his way through the crowd to the princess's side and said, "Madam, do not forget poor Charming." Then she remembered all he had done for her, and without saying a word to anyone, went straight to the tower and with her own hands took off Charming's chains. I'm glad that was what she took off, leaving him chained and taking off something else. Then, putting a golden crown upon his head and the royal mantle upon his shoulders, she said, "Come, faithful Charming, I make you king, and will take you for my husband." For she's now king of 2 kingdoms. Charming, once more free and happy, she's now queen of 2 kingdoms, fell at her feet and thanked her for her gracious words. Everybody was delighted that he should be king, and the wedding, which took place at once, of course, was the prettiest that can be imagined, and Prince Charming and Princess Goldilocks lived happily ever after. There you go! And have you heard that version at all before? No bears were harmed in the telling of this story whatsoever. Prince Charming and Princess Prettiest Goldilocks. Such a weird one. Anyway, and that one is a retelling of a tale by Madame de Aulnoy, which I think she wrote a bunch in French. So very peculiar. Oh my goodness. And it's 5 minutes to 3, so I won't start another story. I shall bookmark the end of that. The History of Whittington is the next one. Which I probably will actually go ahead and carry on reading some more from the Blue Fairy book. So this is a book which, because it's longer, but it's made up of a whole series of fairy tales. I started it one other time and read stories from it for several days. But normally when I'm reading these kids' books, I read from start to finish. I start a book, we may have some interruptions along the way. I will keep reading that book until we finish the book. Occasionally there'll be like a game update, and so I'll take a break to do the game update, or Halloween or something like that will happen, and we'll do that, and then we'll come back to that same book. So that book is the only actual book that I've been reading in that time until we finish the book. But with this one, because it's actually such a long book, I'm not doing that. In fact, I'm just going to have a quick look and see how long it says it is. I can't remember. I have said it before. 908 pages. Most of the books I read, we would have finished before now. They're usually about 300 to 400 pages in the format that my reader, my book, ebook thing shows it to me. And I average it out to about a minute per page if I'm choosing to wear. Oh, thank you for the hydrate, Redeem. We are all going to drink some water now. Definitely needed. Thank you so much for that, Joltaire. That is really appreciated. I needed it after all that reading. So I read 3 days a week. Today is Friday here in New Zealand. You can see my clock up there. I read from 1 to 3 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday here in New Zealand. If you go to my schedule page, you'll see the days I'm on in your time zone. I don't care what it says I'm going to be doing. Most of the time I'm reading. I'm saying that because I may have edited something and then forgot to change it back. Schedule. Sorry. There you go. There's the link for it. It's, one of the other tabs on the Twitch page. So don't forget, anytime you look at that, it will tell you corrected for your time zone, as long as you're not using a VPN that changes you to look like you're in another country completely. So come back and join us for more of the story. I only read public domain children's books. We have children's books include young adult, like the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, those sort of ones as well. Sometimes they're really, really, really young books, like read alouds to little children, and sometimes they're more like this sort of thing. And then the ones that are more fun are usually what's the boy scientist one? I can't remember his name. Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys. There's a bunch of them which are done by Stratemeyer Syndicate, which have been really good. I've also in the past read a lot of English children's stories where they're ones written by English authors for children, young adults, teenagers, mainly preteens. Ones by Edith Nesbit. She's the lady who wrote The Secret Garden and The Railway Children. Those have been fantastic fun. And I wish she had written more, because I am coming to the end of what she has available. I'm reading less of them because there's so few left. But often we will make some discoveries about an author who really was, in their time, quite revolutionary. May not seem to be revolutionary now, but at the time, quite revolutionary, just because, they're bucking the social trend of their era to say that kids need to have entertainment that is entertainment. It can have a moral to the story, but it's not just preaching at them stories. Also things like not making the whole of treating girls and boys fairly between them, and actually not having to have gendered roles. Not making that the whole point of the story, because that's a bit preachy as well, but actually putting threads of that thought into a story. Edith Nesbit's been really good at doing that sort of thing, where the boys will actually discover that they're getting bored doing the men's thing off sitting chatting about stuff, while the girls are working in the kitchen doing the dishes and things like that, when everybody is wanting to get all this stuff done and go and have an adventure. And so the boys give up what they're doing, mimicking their dads, and they go and help the girls, and they find that they have a lot of fun, and they actually get the job done, and then they can go off and do the actual adventure thing that they were going to do. So there's been a lot of that sort of thing. We've actually had schoolgirl stories where the books that were written, even though to us they're really tame, were banned at girls' schools, and they even had book burnings, because the books were about the girls having fun themselves, instead of teaching them high moral lessons, which apparently girls needed more than boys did back in the day. By that stage, boys already had some fun stories, but the girls didn't. So we read a really wide range, and I only read public domain or stuff I have express permission for. So there you go. Look forward to seeing you all again next time. Bring some friends if you'd like to. We do have a fairly strict set of language moderating things set up here, but it's not that we're going to kick you off the channel. It's just to keep it a family friendly space, that's all. So we look forward to seeing you next time. Don't forget, stay healthy and happy